Good evening, everyone. I can hear young children's cries and voices in the street below. It's Halloween. We may get visited. As I look out of the window, I can see some leaves just fluttering in the breeze and the rain under a lamp. Life's just carrying on while we continue to meet together. I wonder how the view is from your zendo right now, what you can hear, what you can see, what you can sense through your window in the world beyond that's still going on and happening. So this is day 3, really, of our retreat, and I'm so grateful that you keep coming back. It's very precious to feel your presence and support and your constancy. It feels that such a big part of practice is to keep coming back, particularly when, for some of us, this isn't our best medium. We have to cross over our preferences to support each other, because this is it right now. So I have a lot of gratitude for you being here, and a lot of wonder when I see you arrive. Katagiri Roshi talked about practice as touching the heartstrings, and I think we've had, over the last 2.5 days, much touching of the heartstrings, and particularly during the wonderful afternoon sessions and time together in the intimacy of breakout rooms. And I look forward to that deepening and developing as the retreat continues. And it's wonderful again to welcome Flint, all the way from Hawaii, all the way across the world, and Lynne this evening, who's going to offer us a talk. So much pleasure. Hand over to both of them. Thank you very much.
I will say very briefly that I appreciate arriving each day at the end of a day in which I know you've been practicing fully and I've been on my own. But I arrive, of course, just after I've woken up in the morning. And so it's early in the day. In this continuous circle of the way called the earth, circling around the sun and the moon coming with us as we spin through the universe. And I've invited Lynne to join us here, sort of in the middle, in a way, to just offer her reflections on where we've come to this point. She's being our head student. That's a good opportunity for her and a good opportunity for you to meet around what's moving in our retreat. So some of you who have seen the Shuso or head student ceremonies, which this is not it, of course, but there's the moment in which someone says, "Now hear the head student." So Lynne, please join us and offer what you'd wish. Thank you.
Just want to sit for a moment and be with you all from this place. And as you can hear, my voice is a little bit stretched, but you'll see how it goes. I think the first things that arise in me are a combination of humility, simply being here humbles me, gratitude, and deep gratitude to all of the teachers that are here now, all of the teachers that have been here before us, all the life teachings, all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we have been so aware of in this talk about the circle of the way. And deep gratitude to all of you for shaping this retreat, as we're all doing. I wrote a little poem, and as these things do, they kind of arise. So I was going to read that to you just as a beginning. We are the walking way. Hearts meeting hearts. Minds meeting minds. Rock pool creatures opening and closing as life's tide flows in and out. We are water, shaped and shaping each other. Crystals, snowflakes, raindrops, the steady stream of practice. We are the blood vein flowing, the path that is not a path, the circle that is not quite a circle. We are the spirit of life, racing, turning, spinning, everything and nothing, lighting the world together. And I really feel that lighting. And I was aware, like Josh was aware, that it's Halloween this evening. And as I'm sitting here, I know that Peter is downstairs ready to man the door if somebody comes. And I was thinking about, the fact that Halloween is that traditional time of when the veil, if we like, between what we might call the spirit realm and the living realm is thinner. I don't know what the right word is. More transparent. And I was thinking about that as in relation to the retreat and how we are talking about walking with all of those ancestors. And I was recognizing that, that there feel to be the sort of several elements for me that are going through. I'm very aware of how deeply we are all connecting. I'm very aware of that sense of the continuity of practice. And I'm very aware of relationships, if you like. I don't know what you'd call it. That fits with the connecting, really. And I'm also aware, when Flint was talking about maturity and how all that we're doing is to do with us growing up, waking up outwards in every direction we possibly can. I have a sort of Sputnik image for that. And we're and as we do that, we're doing it in the service of maturity. And that maturity really is to do with us being able to, in any way possible, to begin to meet those bodhisattva vows. And they were sort of sitting with me. I've had this image of all of these things kind of spinning around the Bodhisattva vows. They feel to be right in the center of it all. And I just wanted to remind you really of the first verse. I was just going to read the first verse because it felt like that was how things should begin, being so numberless. And I'm going to read this second verse actually because I think it's we vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. We vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. We vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. We vow to embody it. And I can feel my body sort of settling. I don't know whether that's the right word, into that. And when I first began to talk, I was aware that I was, my heart was beating a little at the thought of speaking to you all. But it feels as if, kind of that settling. And when I was thinking about how do I even begin to reflect on something as deep and expansive and well, just rich beyond words. It's all beyond words. So I was thinking about deep moments for me, and that was how I thought, well, I could share perhaps some of those deep moments and what they mean for me, what they have meant for me. And I know that one of my first deep moments was on Friday night when Flint showed us his blood vein document, and I could feel that my hands know about folding and unfolding, and they know about that very process. And what I was feeling as Flint was doing that was the folding on and the unfolding of his life, and the folding and the unfolding of all of those lives of those people who had been named. And then I thought about all the people who weren't named, all of those many, many practitioners who would be across different countries, different continents, and who still continued the practice. And there's, with that, again, that profound sense of humility and that unbelievable gratitude, because for me that's the ground on which I begin to stand and ground on which we walk together. And I wanted to read a little bit from, I've been reading a book called The Circle of the Way, which is by somebody called Barbara O'Brien. And she puts much better than I would that sense of that connectedness with all of those people who have been a part of this practice. This paragraph that I'm going to read is called Roots and Flowers, which I rather love the name of it. Some years ago, I received Jukai. Jukai is a ceremony in which a lay Zen practitioner vows to observe the precepts and walk the Buddhist path. As preparation, I sewed a rakusu, a miniature monastic robe worn over the chest like a bib. Doing this required stitching little strips of cloth together in a pattern meant to suggest rice paddies, all the while receiving the ancient refuges. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Sangha refers to the fellowship of Buddhists, whether one community or all Buddhists everywhere. One day while the Rakusu project was ongoing, I came across a photo of a Laotian monk's robe drying on a clothesline. The robe was sewn with the same rice paddy pattern I was stitching into my rakusu. And this moved me deeply. Time and distance collapsed. Cultural and sectarian differences melted away. With my vows and stitches, I was entering great Sangha, the community of people walking the Buddha's path throughout space and time, in the ways that may be hard for an observer to understand. Buddhist history is not simply a matter of intellectual interest to those who practice it, because that history is subtly but inextricably woven into the living practice. And this is true because Buddhism is not a belief system, a philosophy, or something that can be done in isolation. It is the ongoing, collaborative effort of the students and teachers, the monastics and lay people who receive teachings from the ancestors and then pass them on to new generation. That for me really encapsulated some of what we have been sharing. That sense of it being an ongoing process. I'm going to take my glasses off because I only need them really for reading. So I'm going to pop them up there. And I feel this sense that we are creating the path all the time as we go. And it's not really a path. And I can remember Flint saying a while ago, it's a path that's not a path. And then it occurred to me when I was thinking about even the word "the way," that actually, when we did when we created the website for the Justice Sangha, the logo that is on the website has the Enzo, the circle, and then in it, the kanjis that are in there, we couldn't find one that said just this. And the one that we found, and you can correct me if I've got this wrong, means the way. And so for me, there was something about, well, we're already doing this. We're already doing the circle of the way. And that seems to me what this retreat is reminding us about. We're already walking this together. And I feel now, as I'm that sense of, when we did the practice that we did yesterday with Trudy, where she talked about that wonderful sense of us having generations within us and other generations having generations within them, and that our cells are not just unique to us, but we have our children's cells and grandchildren's cells and mothers, and that sense of how we don't really know what we are, and we're this complex, multiple, unbelievable, living, flowing life. And I have a sense also that in my bones somewhere there are all of those ancestors too, and that we're breathing air that has perhaps been circulated around the world so many times, and the water that has been circled around so many times, and we're all in the same place. And I thought about Trudy again. I think that also moved me. It moved so many people, that moment where Trudy talked about touching the tree and the universe liking our attention. And I've been reading a book recently that, you know, how things kind of pop up, and you don't know where they've come from, but you sort of say yes to them. A friend of mine has given me a book which is called The Power of Water, which I'd never come across before, which is by a Japanese researcher. I'll see if I can find his name, so that you will, because somebody will probably ask. Called Masaru Emoto, and it's called The True Power of Water. And this gentleman is a researcher, and what he was doing was researching water. And what he did was he managed to find a way of photographing water when it was just on the point of freezing to see what sort of crystals it made. And what he discovered was that it didn't always make the same sort of crystals. And he did all sorts of research into different sorts of water, like tap water, natural water, mineral water, and discovering that the crystals were not always the same. And then what he discovered, which is the thing that kind of really moved me and linked with the hand on the tree, was he discovered that if you talked to water, crystals were different. And if you talked to it in a way that was very negative, it couldn't form crystals properly. And the most beautiful crystals were the ones when he offered it love and gratitude. And for me, that really spoke to how the universe receives us in ways that we have no idea. And we are part of it all, not, but we have also ways of connecting that we don't know about. And then he talks about, of course, the fact that our bodies are 70% water. So then it asks the question of me, if I talk to the water in my body, will it respond? So I really am paused in the mystery of it all. And if I speak to the water in you, will it respond in a way that is different? We know that seeing each other as Buddha shifts something in us. And today's been a very wet day, so it's been a day full of water and raindrops. And I was thinking about, when Flint talked about the 10 directions. I go to a Tai Chi class, and in the Tai Chi class, we have actually got a practice that's called the 4 directions. And we move in a way that is receiving and acting, the yin and yang of practice. And we move in 4 directions, first of all. And then, when we're doing that, we also move into the compass as well. So we face the north, the south, the east. So we actually move in our bodies in many directions. And I was caught by that sense of, how do we keep moving in many directions? How do we keep moving outward and downward and upward? And how do we keep growing up together and supporting each other? And how do we support each other to mature so that we can meet the bodhisattva vows together? And the thing that really has met me And I guess, my heart knows it, but to hear it said again and again is that we can't do this on our own. I can sit in a room and I can do my Zazen practice on my own, but it's actually not. It's nothing like the same as sitting with Sangha. And for me, the importance of relationship is just vital. And those of you who know me will know that I'm really envying those people that I can see that are sitting next to each other. I'm a very tactile person. And Flint said really clearly to me that reminder that doing this together is actually a defining feature of Zen Buddhism. And for me, the retreat is just that constant reminder of that, of all of those things. And I loved the fact that you did the practice this afternoon, which I didn't do because I was busy kind of getting a sense of what I was going to say, about opening your eyes. And I was thinking, for me, this even goes beyond opening our eyes. It's opening the whole of who we are. It's opening our hearts, our minds, our bodies, that are not separate. We're kind of all one thing. And I'm very aware of how fortunate I am. Again, that gratitude to be part of a Sangha. And I was thinking about how often I meet people. I know it's mostly online, but how often I meet people, how we practice together. But also that sense that continuous practice, of course, is not just when we meet, and that sense that it's the flow throughout our lives. And something struck me a little while ago about the fact that if I think of practice as an object, if you like, then I am reinforcing duality. It's just the flow, and it's continuous. And it's here and now as I sit, looking at all of you, looking at me on screen too. I wanted to just say very briefly, because I'm coming to an end, it's not a long reflection, I hope, that the piece by Kobun Chino Roshi is something that has always meant a lot to me, because you will be aware that some of you will be aware that Jan and I facilitate the precepts group together in the Nothing Missing, or the Justice Sangha, should I say. And I love the phrase life light. And I can see all your life lights as I have been having the privilege of meeting people one-to-one or in breakout rooms. And I certainly had the sense from what's been happening on the retreat, as I've watched people coming to and heard people as they come to inquiry, as we meet in the breakout rooms, as I've met some people for practice discussion, the life light feels to be more stronger. I don't know what the right word is, more illuminating. And I had a little tiny video that I just wanted to finish with, really, and so I need to share screen if that's possible. It's only 2 minutes, but I was caught by that sense of what somehow for me illustrates life light. And I was thinking about things initially like the aurora borealis or something, some spectacular show, and then I thought about fireflies, and I don't know whether you know anything about fireflies, but when they light up, actually, it's because they're signalling to the opposite sex, the opposite gender, and saying, "Look, I'm here." But the thing is that they don't light up unless there's another firefly there. And I was thinking about how we light each other up. So it's only 2 minutes if I can share it, if I can find it. It wasn't actually the video I thought I was going to show you, but it gives a sense of it, that they just light up and they light each other up. And we don't always see it, and then sometimes there's just like a little spark. And I think on that I will finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynne. Your offering is the way of lighting us up. We would normally, and will very soon, go to the reading of our piece that we are sharing over the retreat. But I wanted to say just for a moment, in the Buddhist calendar, right at this time, there's a festival called Sugaki. And Sugaki means feeding the hungry ghosts. And the rituals and practices that are done for the festival are broader than we can go into right now, but they contain a great deal of teaching about training in Buddhism and about offering to what's needed in the world. And Sugaki, like Halloween or the Day of the Dead, is a time for remembering those who have died, and also about resolving our karmic connections with those who have passed. But it's also a time, I think, for resolving our own internal and relational karmic difficulties that are here now, of letting go of the obstacles and blockages we carry around with us. So it's altogether a beautiful time of festival in Halloween and Sugaki. Maybe we'll spend some time with this at another time and know more, but I wanted to acknowledge it as part of the Buddhist ceremonial calendar. So we'll now walk once again to continue to immerse ourselves in Dogen's teaching, and we will have three lovely readers again today. So I will spotlight that for you so you can follow along if you'd like.
On the great road of Buddha ancestors, there is always unsurpassable practice, continuous and sustained. It forms a circle of the way and is never cut off. Between aspiration, practice, enlightenment, and nirvana, there is not a moment's gap. Continuous practice is the circle of the way. This being so, continuous practice is unstained, not forced by you or others. The power of this continuous practice confirms you as well as others. It means your practice affects the entire earth and the entire sky in the 10 directions. Although not noticed by others or by yourself, it is so. Accordingly, by the continuous practice of all Buddhas and ancestors, your practice is actualized and your great road opens up. By your continuous practice, the continuous practice of all Buddhas is actualized, and the great road of all Buddhas opens up. Your continuous practice creates the circle of the way. By this practice, Buddha ancestors abide as Buddha. None abide as Buddha, have Buddha mind, and attain Buddha without cutting off.
Because of this practice, there are the sun, the moon, and the stars. Because of this practice, there are the great earth and the open sky. Because of this practice, there are body, mind, and their environ. Because of this practice, there are the 4 great elements and the 5 skandhas. Continuous practice is not necessarily something people in the world love, but it should be the true place of return for everyone. Because of the continuous practice of all Buddhas, past, present, and future, all Buddhas of past, present, and future are actualized. The effect of such sustained practice is sometimes not hidden. Therefore, you aspire to practice. The effect is sometimes not apparent. Therefore, you may not see, hear, or know it. You should understand that although it is not revealed, it is not hidden. As it is not stained by what is hidden, apparent, existent, or non-existent, you may not notice the causal conditions that led you to be engaged in the practice that actualizes you at this very moment of unknowing. The reason you do not see it is that becoming conscious of it is not anything remarkable. You should investigate in detail that it is so, because the causal condition, the aspiration, is no other than continuous practice. But continuous practice is not limited by the causal condition.
Continuous practice that actualizes itself is no other than your continuous practice right now. The now of this practice is not originally possessed by the self. The now of this practice does not come and go, enter and depart. The word now does not exist before continuous practice. The moment when it is actualized is called now. This being so, your continuous practice of this day is a seed of all Buddhas and the practice of all Buddhas. All Buddhas are actualized and sustained by your continuous practice. By not sustaining your continuous practice, you would be excluding Buddhas, not nurturing Buddhas, excluding continuous practice, not being born and dying simultaneously with all Buddhas, and not studying and practicing with all Buddhas. Blossoms opening and leaves falling now is the actualization of continuous practice. Polishing a mirror and breaking a mirror is not other than this practice. Even if you might try to ignore it in order to hide a crooked intention and escape from it, this ignoring would also be continuous practice. To go off here and there looking for continuous practice appears similar to the aspiration for it. But it is like leaving behind the treasure at the home of your true father and wandering poor in another land. Wandering through wind and water at the risk of your life, you should not discard the treasure of your own father. While you are searching in this way, the Dharma treasure would be missed. This being so, continuous practice should not slacken even for a moment.
And Claire, if you would, the last 3 sentences, basically, wandering through wind and water at the risk of your life, starting there. Would you read there to the end, only substitute mother, please?
Wandering through wind and water at the risk of your life, you should not discard the treasure of your own mother. While you were searching in this way, the Dharma treasure would be missed. This being so, continuous practice should not slacken even for a moment.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the exclusive male pronouns there, and I meant to change it earlier, or even make it more neutral. So I just wanted to actually draw attention to it. There's even a prior sentence in which it appears. And thank you, Lynne, for your beautiful and heartfelt reflections as you walk with me and share this seat for a bit. Because we're about in the midst of this 4 days, the end of the third, but I wanted to share a small reflection, a contemporary reflection, as we listen to these ancient words. And it's a poem that came to my attention that I'd seen many years ago, but hadn't thought of, but popped back up. And the title of the poem is Midway in Our Journey. It's by the poet Mark Nepo, which many of you know. And I believe he wrote this poem a number of years ago surrounding his cancer diagnosis. So you have a bit of a context. But you'll hear, I think, how appropriate it is as we think about where we are in our practice cycle during this retreat. It's not a long poem. I will share it so that you can take a look at it and maybe make a couple of comments. And I will say, before I begin reading, if you look at the first line, even before the entire sentence, I'm kind of stopped by just the first line. Just when we're softened by the years. Just when we're softened by the years or the days in retreat. Just when we're softened. When we have enough experience to see for ourselves, our maps are torn from us. This can be frightening. But there's divine timing in the dissolution of a stubborn mind. The way an inlet waits on the last rock to crumble so it can find its destiny in the sea. Losing the way set out by others is necessary so we can discover for ourselves what it means to be alive. Now we can burn the clothes others have laid out for us, not in anger, but to light our way. Now we can let the soul spill its honey on the unleavened life we've been carrying. Now we can rise. Just as we're softened by being together, by sitting day by day, by caring for each other and listening to each other and seeing each other. And many of us, we've had enough experience to begin to see for ourselves. And just as we begin to mature into our lives a little more fully as we get older, the maps do get torn away, don't they? Which can be disconcerting. And I like the idea of the dissolution of a stubborn mind as we cling to the self-centered thoughts and our self-centered ways. But it allows something to flow more deeply and fully as we lose the way set out by others. And it doesn't mean just, I think, people telling us what we should and shouldn't do. It's how we're shaped by our conditioning. And we learn maybe there's something about being alive that doesn't have to do with just protecting ourselves or trying to please or hurry or struggle or achieve. And I quite love the image of burning the clothes that others have laid out for us, not in anger, but as the fireflies do, to light our way, to signal to each other, to find what's next. And what is ready for leavening. I was thinking about you, John Coatman, and baking your bread. How we rise with just the right attention. And so this was just a reflection of how I was feeling in the midst of this retreat in some ways. And I'll send the poem on so you'll have it if you'd like to reflect on it more. And one more piece, as it always happens as I'm teaching and offering and sharing things and doing my own practice, I also receive communications from teachers who are called students. And sometimes, we have these sort of esoteric stories of receiving messages from the gods or things rising up out of the ethers, but this comes the usual way, by email. And from a student who was reflecting on a shift in perspective, a massive shift in perspective, and I don't need to read that portion of it, but she began her email with a quotation from the commentary on the Vimalakirti Sutra by Joan Sutherland, and I think we had used it, that may have been our last retreat at Sheldon, I believe. I can't remember if that was the last one, but... And for those of you that were there, or if you weren't there, if you've read the sutra, there's a place in the sutra where a very magical thing happens, where there's a goddess in the room who shows up in Vimalakirti's room, and she showers everyone with flower petals. And I can remember Trudy and others coming in and tossing flower petals on us. And it's a particular beautiful turning point in the sutra in which the goddess has appeared and taught in a powerful and penetrating way. But the quotation that this person offered in the beginning of their email is this: when we consider the rain of the flowers, we consider the rain of the flowers, the radiance of everything, and the music that's always playing, the goddess keeps pointing to the beauty of the way. And so the student then wrote in her own words, having reflected on this big shift that had happened, something powerful had stopped. She says, I find myself now left on a dance floor, There's no ceiling and no walls. And though I can't see a floor, my feet seem to touch the ground. And I'm told my partners will vary. On most days, at ordinary times, I'll be guided around the floor by ordinary movements. And I'll make this gesture because she made capitals on some of these. By ordinary movements in daily life. Practicing letting the music carry me and helping me find my rhythm. Learning to move in harmony, no matter the particular turns of the day. Known as doubt, envy, happiness and joy, loss and regret, generosity, selfishness, suffering and lack. A number of elder experienced teachers will be sent that have those names. For with them, there are no distinctions. Each provide ample lessons learned from their teachers, humility and grace. In the air, celestial music plays. It delivers me back to where I started earlier on this path, back to feeling shy and uncertain. I miss, and then she elaborated some particularities which are personal and I won't share, but some of the prior experiences which had been very challenging from her smaller perspective. And she said she missed this. I could blame its forces for my resistance. Out on the dance floor, it's unmistakable that the resistance dwells in me. I take comfort in that. I take comfort in that I will not be out there alone. You will be here too. She's speaking to me, but it's more general. I take comfort in that I will not be out there alone. You'll be here too. And because we are one of the ancients' own, and they are a mirthsome crowd like the ancient Greek gods, they believe in life's travails. Everything is better served when one is not only one, nor are they two. So it seemed a bit like a song or a guide into a magical place, which is actually our own lives, of joining in the dance, like in the Wendell Berry piece about joining our hands and joining in the dance. And this is, of course, what we continue now. Let's go to our piece by Dogen now. And we'll be reflecting on the second middle section, which begins, because of this practice, there are the sun, the moon, and the stars. Because of this practice, there are the great earth and the open sky. Because of this practice, their body, mind, and their environs. Because of this practice, there are the 4 great elements and the 5 skandhas. If I remember correctly, Josh brought this piece forward in his initial reflection the first evening as he invited us to enter the retreat. It's very poetic and inspiring. And each time I read it, because of this practice, there are the sun and the moon and the stars. I think, what could this possibly mean? Because of this practice, there are the great earth and the open sky. In Dogen's companion piece, Self-Fulfilling Samadhi, from which I've quoted quite liberally already, he says, when even for a moment you express the Buddha's seal in the 3 actions by sitting upright in samadhi. In other words, when even for a moment you sit zazen, the whole phenomenal world becomes the Buddha's seal, and the entire sky turns into enlightenment. Because of continuity, not just continuous practice, but because of the deep reality of continuity, of dependent origination, that everything exists only because of everything else. There are no things. Separation is, at this level, an illusion. Even connection doesn't describe it, because that would assume there are separate things that somehow were separate and then meet. And in our everyday world, of course, that's true. But from the most fundamental understanding, the larger perspective, this is continuity of contingency, of dependent origination, of the great circle of the way, which is nothing other than our life. Because of continuity, there is everything. We sometimes say that if we understand the practices and the teachings most deeply, there's emptiness, shunyata, but it doesn't mean nothingness. It's a cipher for empty of individuality, empty of separateness. So emptiness actually means fullness of everything. Because of this practice, there is everything. And everything is nothing but this practice. And just like the beautiful research that Trudy brought to you yesterday, and the practices, we know that there is such an intimate interplay from the cellular to the celestial, with no gap. Because of this way, there is everything. And when we sit zazen, that's actually what we're celebrating and expressing. Not something actually that personal in a way. But we can only do it personally because this is our vehicle. The next sentence of Dogen says, continuous practice is not necessarily something people in the world love, but it should be the true place of return for everyone. In the midst of this piece he's writing, just as we're in the midst of our retreat, why would he make such a statement? Not necessarily something people in the world love. We've come to begin to feel that if continuous practice is a perspective which opens us to an appreciation of this fullness of life's unfolding, we begin to see, our eyes begin to open, as you practiced yesterday. But you might know from your own experience, but certainly I think it's true as we look and see what's happening in the world right now, that this opening, which practice makes possible, is actually immensely terrifying to most people. Many, many people are terrified to actually live life as it is. It's not something that's welcomed. And for the barriers to be removed, like in the poem we spoke about, and for things to begin to flow is actually a horrifying thing to people. And people will do things to prevent that from happening, which are quite violent and harsh and cruel and full of ignorance and delusion, which we see in our world these days. Although there is a longing, this sort of desperate, really desperate grasping for continuation, there is not necessarily an appreciation for continuity. We see in our world a grasping for let things just continue going on as the way they've always gone on. Let those who are in power remain in power. Let our systems stay like they are. Please don't change them. It's too terrifying. So there's a desperate grasping for continuation, but not an appreciation for continuity, which would open a world of generosity and care. Instead, there's just keep going, whatever the cost. And the cost we see is often the subtle violence of speech and action, harsh racial and social division, separation and discrimination at many, many levels, and outright violent aggression. So many people are not interested in the truth, capital T, because it threatens to shatter their perspective. The very thing you're willing to engage through your practice. You're doing something quite unusual that requires courage. So please don't underestimate yourselves. Never underestimate what you're doing. It's something necessary in the world and against the stream of habit and conditioning as you enter the stream of Buddha's way. And what is this at the end of the phrase where being a true place of return for everyone? Well, it certainly references continuous practice. We return, as Elliot spoke of and Josh voiced about returning and from where you started and realizing it freshly in some way for the first time. But I do believe that it points to what I might, and some of you know very wonderfully, Donna Martin, who has taught Hakomi for so many of us for so long. She calls it remembering wholeness. That continuous practice, this return, is remembering wholeness and our place in the larger picture, the largest possible perspective. And this is expressed in the refuges, and also in the 3 pure precepts that we receive in the beginning of the more enumerated list of precepts. This is the true place of return for everyone. I'm going to screen share a piece again for you because I want you to follow the words. And what I'm going to show you are the refuges and the 3 pure precepts, or what are called here boundless precepts, that are formulated by Norman Fischer in his marriage ceremony. And I think it's useful to use the ones that are from the marriage ceremony because it speaks to this intimate relationality that we're focusing on. So in terms of the 3 refuges, say these with me. You're muted, so no one will hear you except your friends. Let's say them together, okay? I take refuge in Buddha. This is the stillness, the clarity, the kindness that is the real nature of all life. I take refuge in Dharma. This is the way of life, day by day, that accords with Buddha. I take refuge in Sangha. This is the community of all beings that is our refuge and support. So just pausing there. This is our return, isn't it? To the stillness, the clarity, and the kindness, to a way of life and a community which accords with Buddha and is the source of our refuge and support. This is what's being spoken of in this one line. And the 3 boundless precepts, let's say those together. I vow to refrain from all action that increases suffering. This is the intention to always practice a wise restraint. I vow to perform all actions that increases awareness. This is the intention to actually do what occurs to us that can make ourselves and others truly happy. I vow to live for and with all being. This is the intention, to always try to see everything with an unselfish eye. So the vow is to do all that is good, to refrain from all that is unwise or unwholesome, and to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. I believe, and I'll send you a copy of this as well, so you can review it. And once again, we have the expression of what it means of true place of return for everyone. The next line, because of the continuous practice of all Buddhas of past, present, and future, all Buddhas of past, present, and future are actualized. We've said this in many ways already, because of the continuous practice of what's gone before us. We are the embodiment of that actualization now. In the self-fulfilling samadhi, which I continue to bring to you, it said, furthermore, all beings in the 10 directions and the 6 realms, including the 3 lower realms, all obtain pure body and mind, realize the state of great emancipation, and manifest the original face. It's everywhere. At this time, all things realize correct awakening. This is when you're sitting in samadhi. At this time, all things realize correct awakening. Myriad objects partake of the Buddha body, and sitting upright under the Bodhi tree, you immediately leap beyond the boundary of awakening. Leap beyond the boundary of awakening. At this moment, you turn the unsurpassably great Dharma wheel and expound the profound wisdom, ultimate and unconditioned. As we endeavor to practice the way together, we step beyond what we could even conceive of as being awake. And just doing a simple practice each day, like we're doing now, we are turning the unsurpassably great Dharma wheel. The Dharma wheel turns because of our practice. And that turning is expounding profound wisdom, not words. Our lives is the expression of the wisdom, ultimate and unconditioned. So liberation is only made possible through our practice. And then he goes on, the effect of such sustained practice is sometimes not hidden, therefore you aspire to practice. It's inspiring. Wow. The effect is sometimes not apparent, therefore you may not see, hear, or know it. You should understand that although it is not revealed, it's not hidden, as it is not stained by what is hidden, apparent, existent, or non-existent. You might not notice the causal conditions that led you to be engaged in the practice, that actualizes you at this very moment of unknowing. The reason you do not see it is that becoming conscious of it is not anything remarkable. Sometimes it's not hidden and we're inspired. Sometimes it's not apparent. So you might not recognize it. But even though you don't recognize it, it's actually not hidden. When you looked at each other in those pinned, simple squares, it's not hidden, even though it may not be apparent to you. And as it's not stained by what's hidden, it's not harmed by that. You may not notice the causal conditions, the things that led you to be engaged in practice. You may not know what got you here. That actualizes you at this very moment of unknowing. It doesn't say that actualizes you in this moment of achieving or knowing, of unknowing, of that last rock crumbling of a stubborn mind so that you can flow into the sea, the ocean of Buddha's way. The reason you don't see it is that becoming conscious of it, becoming a Buddha, opening to this immensity and isn't anything remarkable. In the Genjo Koan, there's a place in which Dogen writes that there are many features in the dusty world and the world beyond conditions. There are many features of this world. And he says, you see and understand only what your eye of practice can reach. There are infinite number of features here and in the larger world, but you see only as far as your eye of practice and understand only as far as your eye of practice can reach. What is your horizon of awakening? Later, he also says, do not suppose that what you realize becomes your knowledge and is grasped by your consciousness. Although actualized immediately, the inconceivable may not be apparent. Its appearance is beyond your knowledge. This is something you're not going to get in your head. But it is something that you can wake to, express, live, and encourage others with. I hope it's okay if I read just for a moment something that's actually on your website, because I think it's a good reminder at this point. It's something that Josh and Trudy and others of you took to make your name. And it was an email that I actually sent to the entrusted teacher in Madison, Suzanne Kilkus. One day, it just happened to be an email because I was trying to explain something. And I thought it was curious. You know, the Genjo Koan, this amazing piece that Dogen wrote, was a letter he wrote to one of his students. It wasn't some great sermon or sutra. And this is something that I wrote to Suzanne. I said, you know, we tend to think that we are a problem to be solved. And consciously or unconsciously, we have this uneasy feeling that there's something missing. I know all of us have this sense, you know, something's not quite right. So we have this sense of lack, which we habitually defend around, and we organize experience to deal with this vulnerability and construct and cling to the idea of a self as a defense against this fear of groundlessness. Remember what my student said, there's no floor and yet my feet is on the ground. And from a psychological point of view, we look at all this and we think, well, the problem is my conditioning, you know, my past, my history. And if I could only identify and work with all of my conditioning and work it all through, then I might find some relief from my shaky identity and establish a strong sense of self that is robust and healthy. That's the promise of psychotherapy. And then from a spiritual point of view, we hope to either affirm a belief system that we can rely on forever, but that's fundamentalism, or dedicate ourselves to a set of practices that will eventually end our suffering and assuage this existential sense of lack. But that's trying to achieve something. The result is that we either work endlessly towards psychological self-improvement or become a perpetual spiritual seeker longing for nirvana. And there's the trap. Both paths to salvation are flawed because they both miss the shadowy aspect of this sense of lack. Our deepest fears are not that we're not going to be good enough or that we'll eventually die. Those are there. But our shadow fear, the one that we least want to face, is the sense that our sense of self that we rely on for our identity is in truth groundless and without substance. That's the floor really being pulled out. But nothing is missing. We're already perfectly ourselves. And the things we cling to the most, this sense of constructed self, is not actually worthy of our faith and trust. We cling to our conditioning and forsake our true nature. As we work together to soften our seeming requirement for self-improvement and open to the possibility of profound self-acceptance. This is our shift in perspective. This is our capacity, as Mark Nepo says, to rise. And in that final line of Dogen in our piece where he says you should investigate in detail that it is so. Because the causal condition, the aspiration, is no other than continuous practice. All those longings, but continuous practice is not limited by the causal conditions. Because of everything we bring to the table, everything is included in in continuous practice. But everything that we bring, all these particularities, aren't the whole of continuous practice. The only thing that is continuous is this life understood fully from the largest perspective, is true practice. Like a generator which provides electricity to illuminate a bulb, the activity of the generator brings light, but that's lived activity. And the only place where continuous practice manifests is in our everyday lives, exactly as we live them. But the way we love our conditioned lives is not the limit of the way. That perspective is larger.